All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Carlin, and I use they, them pronouns, and I'm the Executive Director of Black Phoenix Organizing Collective. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for Trump's first 100 days, where we are going to be having a dynamic conversation with some amazing panelists that we have here. They have various expertise, and so I'm excited for us to be in conversation with them. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce our panelists to you all in the direction that I see them on my screen. So I'm going to start with Tia, and read you short bios of everyone. So Tia Oso is a specialist in using narrative, messaging, arts, and culture to catalyze change. She leads work to build Black narrative power and advance media reparations as a necessary project for collective liberation. Tia has organized for over 12 years, leading successful campaigns to mobilize thousands of advocates on issues ranging from migrant rights to racial justice to public arts policy. Her work is rooted in the legacies of Black organizing and ancestral resistance, inspired by Afrofuturist visions. So thank you so much, Tia, for joining us. And something that isn't in Tia's bio is that Tia is the new, I always want to say executive director, but I don't think that's your correct title, right?
Senior director.
Senior director at Media 2070. So Tia is going to be our person who's going to be talking to us about the ways that media has been impacted by the Trump administration in its first 100 days. The next person who I see on my screen is Pastor Stewart. So Pastor Warren Stewart Sr. has been the senior pastor of the First Institutional Baptist Church of Phoenix, Arizona since 1977. His ministry is characterized by an unwavering commitment and spirit-filled zeal to engage in evangelizing and emancipation, meeting the needs of the whole person. He's also recognized by others as a man of conscience, commitment, and dedication to the cause of moral leadership, human rights, and a soldier of justice and equality. Stewart has been cited as one of the most influential religious leaders in Arizona and the nation, and his ministry extends internationally. Dr. Stewart organized and led two broad-based coalitions, Arizonans for Martin Luther King Jr. State Holiday and Victory Together Incorporated, that campaigned for Martin Luther King Jr. / Civil Rights Day in Arizona, which was won by a historic vote of the people in the general election of November 3rd, 1992. In 2015, he was inducted into the 30th anniversary of the Martin Luther King Jr. College of Clergy and Laity, Board of Preachers in the Morehouse College, Martin Luther King Jr. International Chapel, Atlanta, Georgia. Pastor Stewart is a husband, father, grandfather, and mentor who has earned 5 degrees, including a Doctor of Ministry degree from American Baptist Seminary of West Berkeley, California. He is the author of 5 books. His first book is Interpreting God's Word in Black Preaching, and his latest is titled Victory Together from Martin Luther King Jr., the story of Dr. Warren H. Stewart, senior governor Evan McMahon, and historic battle for Martin Luther King Jr. holiday in Arizona. Thank you so much, Pastor Stewart, for joining us. You have a ton of historical context that you'll be able to provide for us through the state legislatively. So excited for you to be here and for us to be in conversation. And then last but certainly not least is Dr. Taylor. Dr. Deshawn Taylor is a gynecologist, family planning specialist, and gender-affirming care provider dedicated to reproductive health and equity. She founded the nonprofit Desert Star Institute for Family Planning, Inc., and Health Justice MD LLC, championing reproductive justice for marginalized communities. She is a respected author and speaker on abortion, maternal health, equity, and reproductive justice. Her book, Undue Burden, A Black Woman Physician on Being Christian and Pro-Abortion in the Reproductive Justice Movement, provides a new prism for which to address the attack on abortion rights in America. Thank you so much, Dr. Taylor, for also joining us. Okay. So, my first question to the panel is for if you all can contextualize in your various industries how your industry has been impacted, and then specifically how Black folks within that space have been impacted by the Trump administration and the slew of executive orders that have been passed by the Trump administration.
Thanks, Carlin. I'll start. So my name's again Tia Oso. I use she and her pronouns. I'm the Senior Director of Media 2070, the Campaign for Media Reparations. So I'm going to talk about the impact that this administration's agenda has had on the media, and then I'm going to talk about what that means for Black media. And so for folks who are not that familiar, our media system is largely regulated by the Federal Communications Commission, who issues broadcast licenses to television media as well as radios. And then we have newspapers that largely function independently, publish independently, but there are a series of constitutional protections for the press that are within our Constitution. And then there are, of course, like smaller independent newspapers, newsletters, social media, right, digital media, that all are also supposed to, right, function independently under our First Amendment protections of the Constitution for free speech, and at the foundations of, you know, what America's holds up as democratic ideals is the opportunity and the ability for people to express their views and even be critical of their government without fear of repression. That's what the First Amendment protections are supposed to protect us from government interference in speech. And then since this most recent administration has taken place, what we've seen is that Donald Trump has appointed a federal communications chairman named Brendan Carr, who has really weaponized his position as the chairman of the agency. And mind you, as a media activist and media figure previously, you know, Brendan Carr is quoted as saying that a newsroom's decision about what stories that they need to cover and how to frame them should be beyond the reach of any government official and not be targeted by them. This is his quote in 2021. So it's interesting that in 2025, we have him as the chairman of the FCC, using his chairmanship position to investigate diversity programs that different media entities are enacting in order to increase diversity in their newsrooms. Using his position of power as the FCC chairperson to investigate media institutions, or threaten to investigate media institutions that have printed stories or articles or broadcast stories that are critical of President Trump, or even just stating facts about him, such as him being a convicted sex offender, threatening them with lawsuits and investigations. The actions of this administration around media have been really blatantly violations of the First Amendment, as well as other federal communications law. We have the president and other members of the White House threatening journalists, both on social media and in their rhetoric and in press conferences. We have the president's own press secretary being hostile to members of the media, locking members of the media out of press briefings, of which they're supposed to be free and open access, without discrimination as to which media outlets can participate, refusing to call on reporters that are representative of outlets that they feel like are critical of President Trump. It's really turning into, instead of an institution that is protecting our speech and protecting our media systems, they're, you know, basically these people are uh, exercising their powers as though they work personally for Trump, and they are censoring his critics, and then championing the people who are willing to spout positive pro-Trump propaganda. Um, there is a quote that I'm going to share here from media law professor Victor Picard at Penn State. where he says, this is the most corrupt FCC in the agency's history. What we're seeing now is a mafia style behavior where the FCC is trying to shake down corporations and entire industries in order to carry out Trump's agenda, to carry out Project 2025. We have seen harassment and threats to defund National Public Radio and the public broadcasting station, which, share broadly and try to share broadly educational programming, informative programming, and to provide good quality, unbiased news and information to people all across the country. And, even though the budgets of these institutions don't rely totally on government funding, they do receive, significant tax um, uh, tax protections as nonprofit status, as well as a portion of tax dollars as performing a public good, meaning public information and public broadcasting. Um, so they're using the power of this agency not only to threaten corporations, but also public and nonprofits, institutions that are trying to do good. And if they don't bend to the administration's will, they are threatening to pull their broadcast licenses, pulling their public funding dollars and grant dollars away. Grants, that's the term I was looking for. It's like taxes. It's grants. They get grants for doing public goods. That's what charitable grants are for. And then also using the bully pulpit of the presidency to threaten and intimidate people, which is specifically and explicitly the protection that we have for free speech in this country, is to not be threatened by the government for what it is that you say, that you are able, we have the freedom to critique the government. And so what does this mean for Black media? Pulling government grants from any institution, but especially Black institutions, is a threat to their sustainability and their ability to communicate to their communities. Also being hostile to the media. We've seen in Oklahoma, the Black Wall Street Times, where President Trump was critical of the Black Wall Street Times commemoration of the Tulsa Race Massacre. In their coverage, their editorial director, their editorial offices started to receive so many threats that they had to close their business offices and move their offices to another state in order to be able to continue to operate their media company. We see people who are being threatened when we see threats and attacks on diversity programs, a lot of times Black newspapers rely on internships or, diversity program initiatives for their ad dollars and others, Black History Month, Juneteenth, advertising specials and things of that nature, where corporations who would otherwise maybe not necessarily prioritize working with Black media, right, would use the occasions of, holidays or other commemorations in order to, do sponsorships and things of that nature. We are seeing those programs closed and those programs shuttered because this administration has put a chilling effect on people's diversity, equity, and inclusion programming. And so that threatens our sustainability of our institutions. And it also makes it so that we're facing public threats because we have an administration that is putting a target on the backs of our institutions and programs and projects that celebrate Black people and Black culture. And so all of this should be very concerning. And I think it's really important that we not only have these have awareness of what's happening to folks individually, but what systemic mechanisms that the administration is using in order to do this.
Thank you so much, Tia, for giving us that landscape of the media. Pastor Stewart, we're going to go with you next.
Well, from day one, January the 20th of 2025, Donald Trump has launched an assault and an attack on people of African descent, other people of color, upon justice, upon what we pledge when we pledge to the American flag with liberty and justice for all. The socio-political climate that he has fostered is, well, to use his words, he's trying to obliterate the contributions of people of color that have made this nation the nation that it is. And we are under assault and we are under attack. He's questioned. for those who don't know, he causes people to question who they are, their personhood. And certainly he treats people of color and other people of various persuasions as if they are nobody and nothing. I have said in the past that the MAGA movement, Make America Great Again, is Make America White Again. And he is very blatant, and he is very arrogant in what he does and unapologetic. Well, let me say this, that as a result of the general election in November of 2024, none of us who are people of color should have any questions about how the majority of voters feel about Black people and people of color. I mean, if you were in a fairyland or a fantasy land before that, you certainly should have been awakened out of that immediately. And we must, and I've been telling people wherever I get a chance to speak, is that we must not simply complain and comply. We must engage in courageous resistance. We must say that we will not go in reverse as a people. We will not allow this country to go in reverse as a people when it comes to justice, liberty, and justice for all, regardless of race, creed, color, gender, sexual orientation, etc. We cannot and will not allow this to happen. What grieves me is that Donald Trump is a cult leader, and it appears that he has in his cult the Republican Party, and the majority, they hold the majority in the House of Representatives, they hold the majority in the Senate, they hold the majority on the U.S. Supreme Court, and it appears that he can do no wrong, and that they just stand by and allow him to upend the principles that this country claimed to be built upon, even though they never practiced it. I mean, the Constitution, the preamble, all that was written for white men. It wasn't even written for white women. But what bothers me more is how they just allow him to do what they would allow no other person in that office to do. It is absolutely almost unbelievable, but we know that it is believable.
Pastor Stewart, I just want to make sure are you still there? Okay.
Yes, I'm back now. I'm back now. Yeah. Well, I believe you heard my last statement. So that's all I have to say right now.
Okay, thank you. No, everything that you were saying is 100% spot on. Dr. Taylor, let us hear from you.
Yes, so I apologize that I lost my voice due to being ill, but I am hoping that I'm coming through and you can hear me well. And so I am here representing the healthcare sector. And there has been profound impacts on our community and the people we serve in Trump's 100 days in office. One of the biggest things that we have experienced in the healthcare sector is the freezing and cutting funding for reproductive health programs. Executive orders have targeted federal funding programs like Title X, which is the nation's sole federal funded family planning program. And the potential other impacts of other cuts to sexual and reproductive health related programs. So this is reducing people's access to birth control, STI testing, cancer screenings, other vital services, which Black communities often rely on these federal funded programs more heavily due to historical underinvestment in the healthcare infrastructure for Black people and other people of color. Another significant issue is this whole attack on DEI, weakening data collection and health equity initiatives. So this has huge, wide implications for public health. This is halting research into health disparities, such as those in Black maternal health. It's impacting agencies like the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the National Institute for, National Institutes of Health. And they collect vital data to inform interventions. So this hinders actions and efforts to understand, and address the severe Black maternal mortality crisis. And then we have the challenges to the Emergency Medical Treatment Labor Act. The administration will not enforce the requirement for emergency rooms to provide stabilizing treatment, including abortion, to people even in states with restrictive abortion bans. So this is putting pregnant individuals, and especially Black women who experience higher rates of pregnancy and complications, at greater risk of severe health outcomes or death. So this administration has had profound influence on reproductive health care in a negative way. And these impacts are amplified within the Black community, and also for Black physicians and other healthcare professionals who are experiencing these systemic inequities.
Thank you for that, Dr. Taylor. Okay, Tia, I want to come to you again, and I have a question around how do you think, or what role do you feel like the media has played in both normalizing Trump as he is, and then also spreading mis and disinformation around the impacts of his policy decisions? Like, for example, I know there's been a lot of conversation and confusion for people around executive orders. A lot of people believe that an executive order is a law and don't understand that an executive order is a memo to the executive branch, which like the president oversees, but it is not a law. So can you give us, like, with your expertise in media analysis and also like comm strategy, about how, like, the role that media has played in spreading the message and disinformation, and in many ways legitimizing the authoritarian and fascist things that Trump is doing?
Yeah, I think that this is a great question. I think it's important for us to remember, before Donald Trump got heavily involved in politics, most recently, he was a media figure. He had a reality show. He was featured a lot on, entertainment news. And the thing that I also always point out to people is because of his kind of status as a real estate mogul and, boisterous, notable personality in entertainment and the entertainment, like entertainment media culture politics field. He also is you like shouted out in a lot of like rap and hip hop songs, right? So people's familiarity with him is as a personality and a figure. And so before running for president, the way that he, entered national politics is through the controversy around accusing President Barack Obama of not being a US citizen and making public statements that the media then published. So instead of, vetting this commentary as outlandish and fringe, right? They legitimized his questions around Barack Obama and Barack Obama's citizenship and whether or not his presidency was legitimate. Those statements and those attacks on President Obama were legitimized, even though Donald Trump is a private figure, again, the guy from The Apprentice, right? And so that is part and parcel of his rise to prominence in the political sphere by legitimizing those critiques and giving them news headlines. And then also when he first began to run for president in the first election in 2015, where he was his first political speech was making baseless attacks on Mexican immigrants and saying that, they're coming here bringing drugs and crime. Maybe some of them are good people. We need to shut the border down until we figure things out. Again, a person who has never been so much as a Boy Scout being given a legitimate political platform, even though he's not ever held public office, never done anything in the public interest, and also has quite a track record of being a discriminatory person. And so in treating him like an entertainment figure, and almost a character, dominant media has very much normalized and legitimized Donald Trump. And then instead of critiquing either him are the base of people, Pastor Story said, the cult-like following that he has, as them being, dangerous, right, for democracy and dangerous politically. His rhetoric has been shown in different studies to actually lead to violence, literal violence, where people are losing their lives because of his anti-Muslim rhetoric, anti-immigrant rhetoric, anti-women rhetoric. Instead of treating that as though it is, we have a media who is reporting on what he says as though it's a factual, not providing more context to the things that he says, not fact checking. And then once, he did start to become fact checked, like on the debate trail and things of that nature, him being very hostile towards the media. I know members of the media, myself, who have been attacked at Donald Trump's rallies, like physically attacked by people, and he has like fomented that against them. So I think that the role the media has played has been really to shirk their responsibility for actually informing the public. I also think it's important for us to understand that not only that other media companies that have been purchased by billionaires, like the Washington Post being owned by Jeff Bezos, who also owns Amazon, just for one example, there has been now an alignment of these billionaires owning our major media platforms and systems, so there'll be even less critique. They are, censoring their editorial boards for making endorsements in the last election, where the editorial boards made it very clear that they would have endorsed Kamala Harris for president as opposed to Donald Trump. And so instead of allowing them to have the editorial freedom to publish those endorsements, we see these billionaire owners, the same people who were sitting behind Donald Trump during his inauguration, are the people who own these newspapers, censored their editorial boards to the point where some of these people, many of those people quit, in protest. We see them also aligning now the most powerful media companies behind him. And we, like I shared in my opening remarks, what happens if you don't support him, right? You're going to be set up to be sued, attacked, investigated. You might lose your license, all of these different types of things. And so I think it's important for us to understand that it's not just the media is not neutral. The media has played a very heavy hand in legitimizing and platforming Donald Trump and the dangerous ideas of the MAGA movement. And it's also important for us to understand that we have to put a really critical eye, not just on these censored and compromised media outlets now that are feeding us information, what they're telling us, what they're not telling us, but also with the deregulation that I talked about with the FCC, we're seeing a flood of misinformation and disinformation from the administration and otherwise, and people who are targeting Black communities with misinformation and disinformation, artificial intelligence as well, to control and manipulate our communities, both to be anti-democratic, to be homophobic, to be Islamophobic, to be anti-immigrant, using digital media platforms to distribute these really harmful, dangerous narratives.
You ain't a word, a whole sermon. Thank you for all of that. I really appreciate you touching on like how our communities are being propagandized and targeted. I want to like add in that the piece of the deregulation is like a continued deregulation, right? We can draw a straight line from the hellscape that we currently live in to Ronald Reagan, which is when I know that deregulation began. And so we're like continuing to live in more and more of how deregulation is exacerbating all of the things, right? Creating space for AI to be used to misinform people, creating space for consolidations of media companies, which you said, and like how that leaves no space for dissent, and then also is in a way normalizing these authoritarian and fascist principles, right? By telling us, oh, you don't, this is, this is what this thing means, or actually the Constitution doesn't say that, or the Constitution says this, but not for those people, right? Which is some of the rhetoric around due process that has been going on. Is there are people that are convinced that due process is not applied to undocumented folks, and that's not true. Right, but because of like all of the things that you're explaining, consolidation, aligned billionaires being in alignment and in cahoots with the government, consolidation of media, as you had said, to smaller newsrooms, which usually report on local things, shuttering because of the consolidation of
Exactly.
there's less and less space to push back against this mis and disinformation. So thank you for giving us that media landscape, and also for naming that the media is not neutral, because that is something that I think a lot of us have been told. The media says that all the time. We're presenting both sides, or like journalistic integrity is that we're being neutral, and it's like, is the integrity in the room with us?
Right. Where's the integrity? And we talk about in Media 2070 in our essay about an invitation to dream media reparations, the historically, racist roots of our media system, and that the idea of media being neutral is actually a myth, and it's a myth that's used to control people from even critiquing the media.
You for that. Okay, Dr. Taylor, I want to bring it to you. So I have 2 questions for you. I'm going to like combine them.
Okay.
Or I'm going to contextualize the question. So we are coming up on, or we just actually 2 days ago passed the 3-year mark, I believe, of Roe being overturned. And as someone who you are a specialist in reproductive health and freedom, I would love to hear from you how Roe being overturned, like what has been that impact just from like that starting point, and then how have things, if at all, because maybe they haven't changed, right, under the Trump administration, and then how specifically have Black physicians like yourself been impacted by the attack on DEI, the attack on Black communities generally, with the uptick of anti-Black rhetoric that not only was happening during the campaign for VP Harris, but that has continued as the Trump administration has been in power and in place.
So I actually was at the Capitol having discussions with some of our congressional leaders around the impact of the 3 years since Roe v. Wade was overturned. I mean, obviously, the Supreme Court justices were put in place by Trump and his previous presidency to deliver what was delivered, and the chaos that it has thrown our country into after removing nearly 50 years of protection for abortion in this country. This idea of leaving it to the states is ludicrous. We've seen what happened. We have an entire geographic region of our country with people who don't have abortion access, and this is disproportionately impacting Black women who take up a significant proportion of the population in the South, where there's almost no abortion access. The back and forth in the rhetoric that this administration is playing to who they think is their base, but really what this is a strong assertion of white patriarchal so-called Christian traditional values, where They're trying to take us back to a time where honestly, even white women weren't happy where they were at home. And the husband was supposed to be the breadwinner. And what they are missing, they're so stuck on this idea that they're not understanding that abortion is more popular than they are. Like the people who are in charge are wielding extreme power that they have achieved through manipulation and disinformation. And they're trying to hold on to that power as long as they can. So basically, what we're seeing across the country with all of these ballot initiatives passing is that the people want a pregnant person to be in charge of making the decision about whether to start or add to their families. And the government should not be involved in that process. But I will say that what the government should be involved in is making it easier for people to access healthcare, because abortion is healthcare. So allowing Medicaid to cover abortion services as well as other reproductive health care, removing these barriers around these geographic barriers, because people's access to healthcare should not be reliant on their zip code. And so any single barrier that gets erected to inhibit people's access to healthcare always disproportionately impacts Black people, because we have already, again, been underinvested and undervalued in the healthcare system. Now, as it relates to Black physicians and healthcare professionals, this attack predates Trump's specific attack on DEI when the Supreme Court undermined affirmative action. And so what we see is a chilling effect related to programs to increase the pipeline of Black physicians and other healthcare professionals. Research has shown that Black communities benefit from Black doctors. And research also has shown that an entire community get impacted positively just by having one Black doctor in their community, even if you were not a patient who saw that doctor. Just the fact that a community has a Black doctor in it, the entire community is more healthy. And so what we're seeing is, first of all, affirmative action isn't necessarily reducing the number of Black people in college, because really we weren't the ones really benefiting from affirmative action. So that's one interesting thing that we learned there. But the problem is the chilling effect in funding for pipeline programs, and so in the disinvestment in HBCUs. So those are all the things that we're seeing as an impact of these policies.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor, for sharing that with us and helping contextualize, one, that this didn't start with Donald Trump, right? Because I think that is a really important piece that oftentimes get lost when we're having conversations about the impacts of the administration. Has the administration accelerated a lot of things? Absolutely. But many of the things, as you pointed out, did not necessarily start with the Trump administration. They're continuation of a very long game that has been played by the right wing of creating the world, right, that they're attempting to force us all into, as you said, that is rooted in white patriarchy. So thank you for spelling that out for us as well. And I do want to say something, I want to tease out a little bit more something that you said about affirmative action, because I think a lot of people actually have a misunderstanding of what affirmative action actually did, as well as what DEI initiatives did as well. So one of the things I remember I was listening to a podcast, and someone was like, one of the things that affirmative action did, for example, was, I remember I was listening to the Majority Report. One of the hosts on there, he's from one of the Dakotas. I can't remember if he's from North or South Dakota, but he was like, people who live in like rural areas like I grew up in, an affirmative action program would be, hey girl, we don't have a lot of people being represented at our college who come from rural areas. So we need to create programs, we need to create pipelines, we need to create a specific way of recruiting folks from those places because there isn't something that exists to ensure that those folks are coming here. So when folk like that, they're like, this is affirmative action, right? It is finding ways to capture all different types of folks, right? It can be geographical, it can be based on race, it can be based on gender, sexual orientation, etc. But most people just think it means Black, and it doesn't. It means all kinds of things. And it will be interesting to see as affirmative action, the chilling effect continues, how folks are going to be unfortunately negatively impacted by this, thinking that they were, harming Black folks. Pastor Stewart, I want to bring it to you. So I do have a question around, and you, Dr. Taylor, it was like you read my mind, or your third eye was open, because I want to ask you, Pastor Stewart, how are you contending with, as a spiritual leader, as a faith leader, with the faux Christian identity, right, that MAGA and the right have very much hijacked and are using and bastardizing to hide many of the egregious things that they're doing, right? Like they talk about, this is, God wants to protect America. This is what God wants. There are some people, like you said, in the MAGA cult who are like, Trump is was divinely brought by God himself to lead America into a new future. So like, how do we contend with that, right? As not only a collective, but like as someone who is, you are a faith leader, how are you talking not only with other faith leaders, but even with your parishioners around like, this is not, we don't know what Jesus they're talking to, but it's not the real, we don't know what God they're talking to, but it is not the one in the Bible.
Well, let me start calling what you just said. I mean, which Jesus are you talking about? I mean, the Jesus that the white evangelicals follow and have wrapped in an American flag is not the Jesus of the Bible. It's not the Jesus of the New Testament. Jesus launched his ministry, and in Luke, the 4th chapter, he quoted Isaiah the prophet, said, the Spirit of the Lord God is upon me. He's anointed me to bring good news to the poor, to set at liberty those who are bound, to recover the sight to the blind, to preach the acceptable year of the Lord. So Jesus's ministry was all about setting people free, not restricting people from being who they are. What the whole Trump administration has done, and what we have to remind all people, people of faith, and even people who are not of faith, that if we believe that God created all humanity, that means that every human being has the imago Dei, which is the image of God in him or her. And therefore, when I see you, regardless of what you look like, regardless of what you talk like, regardless of your language, of your ethnicity, of your sexual orientation, regardless of your class, I'm seeing a brother or a sister who is made in the image of God just like me. But the whole, as you said, the bastardization of the good news of Jesus Christ and of Christianity has taken place by the white evangelicals who just are, well, it goes back to a matter of interpretation. When I earned my doctorate several years ago, my concentration was on something called hermeneutics, which is the science of interpretation. And we have to understand that none of us comes to the scriptures, none of us comes to any situation with a clean slate. We bring our past, we bring our prejudices, we bring our experiences. So therefore, when one understands and interprets God's word, one must recognize that and must be discerning, what am I bringing to the scriptures that is not in there, but I'm bringing my own prejudice. So in my doctoral studies, I came up with 5 principles in the best of Black preaching. And the first one is so important to our conversation tonight. I suggest that he or she who reads and interprets the word of God must see God as actively involved in the continuous holistic liberation of humankind. That if you look at the Bible from the Old Testament to the New Testament, God is in the process of setting people free. So if you have an interpretation of the scriptures that is restricting people, that is not setting people free to be the persons God have created them to be, you have a false and faulty interpretation of God's word. And so that is what I found back 40 years ago when I was working on my doctorate. And that is what is taking place right now with the so-called white evangelicals who are misinterpreting God and what his word has to say. I hope that was helpful to your question.
No, it was absolutely. Thank you for that. That's an excellent framing to all kinds of things, right? The idea that God is living, the word is living, that God is actively liberating, right? Because liberating means that it's happening currently. So yes, I'm gonna take that one. I'm gonna take that. I'm gonna write that check, cash it, okay? Because
Yeah.
that was good. That was good. Yeah, we did. Someone in the chat said we needed that. Absolutely, we did. We absolutely did.
Thank you.
Okay, so I want to. This is for everybody, and so I wanted. Y'all have touched on it, but I want us to tease it out a little bit more of like how have the Trump administration's policies, rhetoric, practices impacted Black folks and the Black community accessing resources. So Dr. Taylor, you touched on it a little bit when you told us about like how Title X funding being cut, how that is impacting folks. So I'm wondering if Tia, if you've been hearing things from folks, Pastor Stewart, if you also have been hearing things, and Dr. Taylor, if there are other resources that folks are not being able to access because of the chilling effect that we're seeing around these various things, right? We kind of touched on how DEI is impacting people being recruited for things, but what are other ways that we may not necessarily be like drawing, that we might not be like, this is like directly connected to this, and other ways that folks are being barred from accessing resources?
Well, let me just say that tens of thousands of people have lost their jobs due to the anti-DEI. And it affects not only those who have lost their jobs, it affects their communities, it affects the vendors who they have been using to purchase items from. It is affecting the sense of security of tens of thousands of people. I mean, it trickles down to the very basics, and this big beautiful bill that he's talking about that is now in the Senate. Thank God there are a few Republican senators who are resisting the cuts it'll make to Medicaid. As Dr. Taylor has suggested, as Tia has talked about, the media, I mean, this will hurt millions of people, and people are already getting sick, injured, and are dying as a result of the Trump administration, and he hasn't been there 6 months yet. This is dangerous. This is destructive. It is demeaning. It is deadly.
Another thing that I can mention from the healthcare sector that I haven't mentioned already is, so Trump reinstated something called the global gag rule, which this is a policy that restricts US foreign aid to organizations that provide or promote abortion services. So this disproportionately affects the countries that are who are in need of aid. And so if you think about the global community of people who receive aid from the United States, these are brown people. So not only are they having devastating impacts right here in our own country, they are spreading these disastrous policies across the world in keeping aid. Now, this was something that had happened previously, but what happens is every time we have a Democratic president, that gets rescinded. And it seems like every time we get a Republican president, then it goes back. So these countries are just kind of on a yo-yo, depending on who the administration is. And so these policies are far-reaching and they have global impact. Another thing that's happened is there's been an abolition of the work that Biden Harris had done related to maternal health. Vice President Kamala Harris did a lot of work to try to get the Momnibus, like really working with congressional leaders to pass the Momnibus Act, which didn't obviously, but getting these states to even actually have maternal mortality review committees where they're gathering the data so we can have a closer look at how policies are impacting maternal health. And so there has been a direct reversal of efforts to address Black maternal mortality, which is a critical racial equity issue.
Great, thank you. Tia, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
I think the thing that I would add is by having media regulators that are more focused on attacking DEI and diversity and, you know, censoring people from being critical of the administration, while encouraging, right, social media platforms like Facebook, for example, to loosen their regulations on hate speech, and violent content, misogynistic content, all of these things. It's impacting people's lives and lived experience. It's making it a more dangerous, making online spaces a more dangerous place to be, and making our social spaces a more dangerous place to be. And you know, I shared earlier about some of the research that has been done around how Donald Trump's rhetoric has led to violence. We've already seen, you know, political violence take place this year, where we lost to a legislator in the state of Minnesota. Um, I don't think that it is, someone had put in the comments earlier, you know, we're in a state of emergency. I don't think it is an exaggeration to say that this is a crisis that we're in. I was in a political study cohort earlier this year, and they taught us a new vocabulary word called interregnum, and it means a low point of leadership, as in society doesn't have a leader. And they contextualize it as like that's the kind of point that we're in right now, is we're not just in a social crisis, but we're in a leadership crisis where we're not getting the direction and the leadership and like the upholding of the values and the ideals literally from the top down. And so the chaos, like Pastor Story has said, the chaos that we're living in is a result of that. So it's not just one thing happening. We're seeing a conflation of all of the worst possible circumstances being unleashed on our society, to the point where, you know, it can also cause a lot of hopelessness.
Thank you for that. Okay. I want to ask y'all, that's actually a perfect segue into the final question that I have for the panelists is, what are words of wisdom that you had to offer folks on how to prepare and survive not only what has come, but like what else is coming down the pipeline? Because we don't necessarily know, right? It feels like that man is shaking the magic 8 ball and asking it, asking it policy questions. And so I think that it's really important for us to, share with folks like what are some words of wisdom that we have for them. All of y'all are seasoned in your experiences. You have a plethora of knowledge and wealth, and you have been and survived all kinds of things. So I feel like y'all are some of the perfect folks to help us, like, what should we be doing? How can we stay encouraged? How can we cultivate hope in this time of leadershiplessness that we are experiencing? And I want to start with you, Dr. Taylor.
Yeah, I think about this a lot. I think, one of the biggest things for me that I hope that people will do is to maintain the vision, right? Hold on to a clear vision of the just and equitable society that we are striving for. Because it's this long-term perspective that's going to provide the motivation and direction during difficult times. Like that's for me, like I've always carried a mission and vision for my life and the impact that I want to make. And when I get tested, I go back to that and remind myself of that. Another important thing is find community. Connect with others who share your concerns and values. That is vital for our emotional resilience, and it can help with our sense of solidarity and shared purpose. And I think one thing that I've been doing since Trump was elected the first time is limiting news consumption. Staying informed is important, but constant exposure to this crazy news can be very overwhelming. Set boundaries on how and when you consume news. Seek out reputable sources, and please try to avoid doom scrolling.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Pastor Stewart.
Well, I would offer 3 H's that we must remember our history, we must remember our heritage, and we must remember our harassment. We've been here before, and our foreparents who were brought here 400 and some years ago as slaves, those who served in slavery, those who were abolitionists, those who tried to provide.
Pastor, I can't hear you.
You can't hear me now?
Okay, we can hear you now. Yes.
Okay, I
You're
don't
back.
know. Oh, okay. Yes, okay, it says my internet connection is unstable. I'm very sorry about that. But again, the history, heritage, and harassment, we've been here before, and we had less, I don't want to say equipment, but we had much less available to us, and we fought and we won. And so if our foreparents could do that in the past, yes, less technology. Thank you, Gisette, for that. Yes, if they could make the advances that we are experiencing today as people, as Black people, as people of color, then we certainly should stand on their shoulders and should not be discouraged. I mean, yes, I heard Dr. Taylor talk. Yes, it can be depressing. it can be mentally demeaning to have your personhood questioned every day you get up. But people have been questioning Black folk ever since we got here. I mean, they questioned us over when they took us from Africa. So we have to form our own narrative and remember our history, our heritage, and that we've been harassed before and that we will overcome. I mean, I'm not being cliche-ish. We will overcome. We did it before and we will indeed do it again. Thank God. And see, here's the problem, and I've been saying this for years. You got the white power structure circling the wagons. They are afraid of the browning of the United States of America. And they know that in just a few years, the majority population in the United States will not be white. And so they're trying to put in laws that cannot be overturned or changed so that they can secure their power. Very similar to the white South African apartheid government. That's what's going on right now. And so we must keep our eyes open. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have too much to add to what Dr. Taylor and Dr. Stewart have shared. So I will take it to personal actions. I think that it's important for us to understand the importance of personal security, safety, and self-defense and community defense. We have been here before. But the benefit, right, of so much progress socially was that we were not in such a volatile situation as we are now. And so it's important for us to go back to remember some of the practices that we had when we were in worse circumstances around gathering in community and having community and information networks, phone trees, checking on people, buddy systems. You know, my people's from Oklahoma, okay, and everybody used to have a gun, and it wasn't just for hunting, right? It was to let people know I'm prepared to defend myself and my family. And so I think that it's important for us to remember the practices that got us through these times before, both personally and in our communities and our practices of safety and resilience, and then also organizing. And so being a part of a community, you know, Dr. Taylor said it, I'm gonna, you know, say, you know, organizations like Black Phoenix Organizing Collective, we need to be organized, and we need to be prepared to advance our ideals, not just uphold them and not just decry and be sad about the fact that they're being attacked, but we need to be willing, ready, and able to rebuild and demand the leadership and be the representational leadership. Some of us need to be running for office. Some of us need to be on boards and commissions. Some of us need to be, you know, building and growing our institutions. And so those are the things that I think are to point towards hope, is the point towards taking a very proactive stance in pushing for the future that we know that we deserve and that we know that is in front of us.
Thank you. Okay, just making sure that there aren't any questions from the audience. Okay, it doesn't look like there are any questions from the audience. So with that, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Thank you to the people in the future who are going to watch this as well for watching. Thank you so much to our panelists for your words of wisdom, for your encouragement, and for really helping ground us in this moment of these unprecedented times that I'm sure all of us are talking. I'm like, I'm tired of that word. We need to retire it. But thank you so much for your wisdom, for your knowledge, for grounding us in this moment and giving us some direction on how we move forward. And I can't wait to see everyone at our next event. Until then, bye.
Thanks so much.